All right. Thank you so much, George. This is great. I'm so glad to be here. I'm looking at the number down in the corner here, 110 participants, and I'm just so pleased to see how the Naples Mac user group has grown over the past couple of years, really bringing new meaning to how we can actually do things online when so many other user groups have struggled to get person to person stuff going. Um, any event, what I want to chat about today is Worldwide Developer Conference. So Apple every year has this big conference where they invite all the developers and reveal what's coming up in new operating systems. And this is all what we learned also. The big important thing, of course, is what the next version of macOS is going to be called. So it's going to be Ventura this time. Apple's moved into the California names. We had the big cat names for a while, but now we're into Ventura, into California names. And so that's always fun. And in previous years, we had really focused on like, oh, this is what's new in iOS, this is what's new in iPadOS, this is what's new in watchOS, this is what's new in macOS. But the problem that runs into is that in the last few years, Apple's been just pushing every feature across all the operating systems. So instead of doing a blow by blow, operating by operating system approach, we're gonna focus on the new features that are the most interesting, some of which cut across multiple operating systems. But before we do that, as George noted, Apple did something a little unusual this year and introduced new Macs at Worldwide Developer Conference. That's unusual. As I said, the company does not normally do this. Normally, it's just focused on what's coming. They might talk about architecture or chips or things like that, but it's very common to get new Macs. So why don't let me share my screen here and we'll get started looking at, you can see here, we're going to start the best of 2022. For those who don't know, I sometimes forget to do this because I've been around for so long. It seems like everyone should know if they don't already. I publish tidbits. We've been publishing tidbits for 32 years now. So we've been watching everything that's happened with Apple for a very long time. You can read more at tidbits.com. But let's talk about Worldwide Developer Conference Mac announcements. First off, the new M2 chip and Macs using it. So this was a surprise. Apple has, of course, came out with the new M1 chip, a couple of years ago. I think it was November of 2020, the first M1 chip Macs shipped. And then in the last, year and a half, we've seen the M1 Pro, the M1 Max, the M1 Ultra powering MacBook Pros, Mac Minis, 24-inch iMac, the new Mac Studio. But the M2 chip is the first sort of big jump. And so let's take a look at what that provides, because it's a lot of the same, as in this thing is blindingly fast. I mean, new M2 Macs are going to be faster than ever before. So we all, I don't know, those people who got the M1 Max, you probably got it, you're like, holy cats, this thing is just speedy. I mean, even the lowest end M1 Macs were just shockingly fast when they came out, and Apple's just continued to increase the performance. But take a look at this M2, 18% faster CPU, 35% faster GPU, 40% faster neural engine. So that's really noticeable. The rule of thumb I've never actually tested this. The rule of thumb is that about a 20% increase in performance is something that you will really feel. So, if it's 5% faster, yeah, whatever, you'll not notice. But it's 20% faster, you will. So numbers like 18%, 35%, 40%, you'll notice those. So that's really good. The other big thing that the M2 does in terms of just in providing more performance is that it's got more memory and faster memory. Faster memory, again, just improves performance, but you can go up to 24 gigabytes of memory. Previously, the M1 was limited at 16 gigabytes. Now, that's a little bit of a tricky thing to talk about because the M series Macs use what Apple calls unified memory. And what's important about unified memory is it's shared between the GPU and the CPU. And all that really means is you get more performance because the two aspects of the computer, the processor power and the graphics stuff, don't have to transfer code back and forth. They can both work on the same information at the same time, and that's much quicker. But so more memory is good. And the fact that Apple has increased it from 16 gig to 24 gig max is really nice. And so we'll be able to, we can kind of anticipate that as we get into the next M2 Max, because you have to expect, right? Apple's going to do the M2 Pro, the M2 Max, the M2 Ultra. And I've already heard someone talking about the M2 Extreme. So who knows whether any of that will actually happen, but it seems a good bet that we'll see the same M2 chips as we saw the M1 chips. So looking forward to that. Probably, M2 is obviously happening now. I'll get to the specific Maxes being used in a second. The M2 Pro and Max, maybe towards the end of the year. M2 Ultra, who knows, maybe beginning 2023. And if this is M2 Extreme, that might be the Mac that's the chip that's waiting for the Mac Pro. So who knows when that's going to happen, but end of this year, beginning of next year, I think we'll be starting to see more of these machines. But okay, so we got specs. What does 20 billion transistors means? What it means is a new MacBook Air. The MacBook Air is the best-selling laptop in the world, according to Apple. And I have no reason to not believe them in this particular case, because the MacBook Air is a great machine. This is a truly, truly wonderful machine, and I have loved this machine ever since it came out. In this particular case, I wanted to show this picture, this from the keynote, because it shows you two important things about the new MacBook Air. One is you got 4 colors. Always nice to have some colors. I still think they could do some better colors. I mean, like bring on the colors from the 24-inch iMac, get those into the MacBook Air. But we still got some the dark grays and the lights and all that. But here's the other cool thing. Notice this little plug over here. That's MagSafe. MagSafe 3 to be specific. And the one thing I don't like about my M1 MacBook Air is that it doesn't have MagSafe. You're stuck with USB-C charging. And MagSafe is brilliant, has been brilliant since it was invented by Apple a bazillion years ago. And I was so sad when they took it out of the laptops for a few years because of the switch to USB-C. So in essence, for those who haven't experienced it, it's a magnetic power adapter, and it just sort of snaps onto the side of the Mac. And if you touch the cord, trip over the cord, sitting in bed and whatnot, the cord just detaches. It just comes right off really easily, rather than pulling your MacBook Air to the floor or torquing around the connector. So that's a really, really good thing. Okay, other stuff with the MacBook Air. This is a new Mac, a really new Mac, as opposed to what we'll get to next, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is not a new Mac. So you'll notice it's got a 13.6 liquid Retina display. This is a gorgeous screen. It's larger than ever before, has smaller bezels around the edge. So it's actually got more pixels than before, and more pixels than the MacBook Pro. It's got Touch ID. It's got the usual backlit keyboard and big trackpad. It's got the screen is brighter, and it's got more speakers. It's actually got better speaker system, better mic array than it had in the past. So up to 2 terabytes of storage, up to 24 gig of RAM, based on that M2. And despite all of this addition, it's actually slightly lighter and slightly thinner than the previous MacBook Airs. The one thing that has changed that might be a little surprising to anyone who's got one is the MacBook Air was always kind of a wedge design, where it's a little thicker in back, a little thinner in the front, and Apple's moved away from that. It's a little more squared off. So that's kind of nice. The MacBook Air is a little bit more expensive at the low end than it used to be. It's now $1199 instead of $999. However, Apple's kept the M1 MacBook Air in the lineup at $999. So if you got, like a grandchild or a student or someone who, is really trying on a tight budget, that $999 MacBook Air is still there. That's the M1 chip. There's still nothing wrong with it. It's still a great machine. I have one sitting right here. But for $11.99, you can bump up to the new M2 MacBook Air with more performance and slightly lighter and slightly smaller. So that's a great machine. So it wasn't the only thing that Apple did, though. They also introduced the M2 13-inch MacBook Pro. This is a really boring machine. I'm sorry, it just is. The only thing that has changed in this machine is the chip. It is the M2 chip instead of the M1 chip. So therefore, it is somewhat faster than it used to be. It could have slightly more memory than it used to. And everything else is exactly the same as the M1 13-inch MacBook Pro, including, and I know there are differing opinions on this, but including the albatross of the Mac world, the touch bar. So if you like the touch bar, this is going to be your last chance to get it, I'm pretty sure. That no other Mac has a touch bar anymore. No other Mac will have a touch bar. So it was a somewhat failed experiment on Apple's part. The company, I think, never really promoted it or evangelized it well enough to developers. And it only ever appeared in the MacBook models. So it was not something you could basically build on your experience as a Mac user in terms of being able to do all sorts of different things. So this machine, I said, the specs are pretty, by the time you get equivalent specs, it's basically the same price as a MacBook Air. And the only advantage it has right now is, well, it's available. The MacBook Air is shipping in July. And two, the 13-inch MacBook Pro has a fan. And what that means is both good and bad. The good is that it can maintain performance a little bit longer under sustained load. So if you were doing something that required a lot of performance, rendering a video, export, that kind of thing, you'll get slightly better performance because it can cool itself, so it can keep the chip cooler. On the downside, it's also going to make a little noise. So, the MacBook Air never makes any noise at all. I love me my silent Macs. So so the 13-inch MacBook Pro, it's here today. You can buy it, but I don't really recommend it. If you're going for an M2 Mac, I'd recommend the MacBook Air. If you want more performance than the MacBook Air, don't mess around with this machine. Go straight to a 14-inch with an M1 Pro. The 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros are really, really nice machines when you need more space, more performance. Okay, one last thing. Apple. This is hard to talk about. Like, this isn't sexy stuff. This isn't like, wow, we're going to do so much for you from Apple. But Apple's been trying really hard over the past really 5-10 years to, frankly, be a better environmental citizen. With the amount of stuff that Apple makes, it matters. That Apple, when they ship stuff across the globe, having smaller packaging makes a difference. Having recyclable packaging, using recyclable materials in their computers and in their phones and everything. And so I just wanted to put this slide up. This is what Apple talks about in terms of their MacBooks. They're not using mercury, they're not using PVC, they're not using beryllium, they're not using BFR. They're cutting down on all these noxious chemicals. They're getting their fiber for the boxes and the like from responsibly managed forests. None of this is sexy, but it's really good that Apple's doing it, and I think they should be acknowledged and applauded for doing that. It's something that we need to see more companies doing. It's not just all, more, better, faster. Sometimes we have to look and try to make it more efficient as well. So just a plug for Apple in that regard. All right, now for the Macs. They're great, they're wonderful, they're Macs, and they're going to work just like your existing Macs, only faster. However, let's talk about now the cool new features: macOS 13 Ventura, iOS 16, iPadOS 16, and watchOS 9. So I will note real quickly, you notice tvOS 16 isn't on here, and HomePod software, the Apple has not even come up with a good name for it. HomePod software version 16 is not here. There are a couple of new features in tvOS 16, but they're so utterly minor that no one cares. And HomePod, Apple hasn't really said anything about what's changing. So we're not going to talk about that at all. Apple didn't see fit to, and it's clear that, Apple's sort of living room strategy with the Apple TV and the HomePod, it's going, but it's not the place where innovation is happening at this point in time. So, okay, what I want to lead off with here is a customizable lock screen. This is probably the thing that you, if you're assuming you're an iPhone user, of course, are going to probably most appreciate in this set of operating system updates. Now, part of it is that we look at our iPhones a lot. I mean, really a lot. If you've turned on screen time and it tells you how many pickups you have during the day, frankly, it's, when I ever look at mine, I'm embarrassed. I cannot believe I look at my iPhone that many times a day, but you do. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, the iPhone is as much, a watch, and it's a phone. You're checking to see what's happened. You're checking to see the messages have come in, all that kind of stuff. So with the iOS 16, you're finally going to be able to customize the screen. Sure, we'll be able to put our own wallpaper up here, and you see, this is Craig Federighi's daughters. He's a head of software engineering at Apple, and but notice in the background, you notice how each of these rectangles, there's the Monday, June 6, 9/41. There's another little rectangle back there, and down at the bottom it says black and white, and there's some dots. What Apple has done is they've turned the iPhone lock screen into essentially a big Apple Watch face. I mean, this is just like customizing an Apple Watch face, where you get complications and you get to choose colors and you get to choose typefaces and things like that. So you can see even here, he's put the date in the top. He's got the time there, and it's using a particular serif font face. It's not a normal font face. And he's got a black and white theme for the picture of his daughters, and you can just swipe back and forth to see different ones. I can't show you this. None of this stuff is out yet, by the way. I should preface all this. Developer betas are out for all of those. Developers are working with it. We expect to see a public beta, which you could download and install in July, probably. I don't specifically recommend that unless you like playing with new stuff and don't mind if things don't work. And then we will expect to get the release of these, usually September for iPhone and iPad and Watch. Sometimes macOS slips into October. So definitely September for the devices, and then pretty much September or October for the Mac. So anyway, customizable lock screen is going to be wonderful. Not only, I don't have it showing here, but not only can you put your picture and adjust the colors and all of that, you can add widgets to this. So if, like me, half the time you're pulling out your iPhone to see what the weather forecast is looking like, seeing if a thunderstorm is going to be rolling in any minute now, you can put that kind of thing right on the lock screen. So you don't even have to unlock your phone and go to the home screen, look at your home screen widgets. Apple just keeps pulling data out of the apps and putting it closer and closer to you. So that's going to be a really interesting capability, and I'm looking forward to playing with it a lot. My suspicion is we'll all just come up with, we'll play with it, and then we'll come up with like the 2 or 3, lock screens we like. I do want to call out one thing that's worth keeping in mind. I don't think it's actually a great feature, but it's something to know about. In iOS 15 last year, Apple introduced a feature called Focus. And Focus, the idea is it's sort of like an expansion of Do Not Disturb, right? You can turn on Do Not Disturb so your phone doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night. You have Do Not Disturb while driving so people don't text you and interrupt you while you're driving and should be paying attention to the road. And Apple said, well, let's expand this. Let's make it so that you could have Focus for when you're at work or when you're watching TV or when you're eating dinner, whatever you want. And you can turn off notifications and all kinds of stuff for that. The problem with Focus is it creates a situation where your phone becomes extremely unpredictable. You have no idea when something's going to come through, when it's not. I mean, Focus, it's a powerful feature, does what Apple says it does, but it creates a very, very unpredictable environment. So the one good thing that Apple's doing with Focus in iOS 16 is different focuses can have different lock screens. So if you have a focus that says, well, hey, when I'm at work, I want to see, a lock screen showing a picture of my filing cabinet at work or something like that. It's really clear I'm in the work focus. And similarly, when you're at home, you could have a picture of your kids, whatever. It makes it easier to see which focus. So hopefully these customizable lock screens that will go along with a particular focus will make it easier to know when you're in that focus and make the phone less unpredictable. So as Sheeta said early on, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. I'm going to maybe cruising on through different features, but if you have features about the custom lock screen, for instance, go ahead.
Adam, if you I do have a couple of questions here for you.
Certainly.
Mitch, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Mitch?
Yes. My question is regarding the new passkey feature, which sounds really great. And I've done a lot of research on that. I understand it's going to work with Face ID and your fingerprint. So that's going to be great. You won't have to keep memorizing your passcodes or use passcode managers if you don't want to. But if you die or become incapacitated, how is somebody in your family going to be able to access passkeys when they require your fingerprint or your Face ID? I've searched the internet. I cannot find a definitive answer.
It's a really good question. That's a really good question, Mitch. And actually, I'll talk more about that when I get to passkeys, because that's another one of my top features that was introduced to WWDC. The very short answer is that the passcode to your phone is always acceptable as a backup to Face ID or Touch ID. So the passcode to your phone is something that someone would need to be able to get in. The slightly longer answer is Apple has a legacy contact feature that you can make someone a legacy contact, and that will give them access should you die. But we can talk a little bit more about that later on. Okay. Any more, Sheeta?
Right. Thank you. We do. Melissa, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Melissa Green? Melissa?
I was wondering about the MagSafe.
Yes. Yeah, and I see in the chat you were asking about the EU adapter mandate for where the EU has just said that all power adapters have to be USB-C. And how that intersects with MagSafe, actually, luckily, is that it doesn't. So there's no problem with having MagSafe because you can also charge via USB-C for in the EU. And the other thing that's kind of nice about that is that it should just be an add-on, for what Apple's doing. So I don't think Apple will be affected in the slightest bit in terms of MagSafe. Where they're going to be hit, and we'll see what happens either this year or next, is USB-C for the iPhone and the iPad. So Apple has resisted doing that in the past across the line. They have it for some of the iPads and the Lightning for all the other iPads and the iPhone. So MagSafe should be okay in that regard.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. All right, Adam, all yours.
Okay. Moving on. Passkeys. See, I told you we were going to get there. Passkeys. We just published a big article about it to Tidbits. My friend Glenn Fleischman wrote. But really simply, passkeys are a replacement for passwords. Passwords are utterly broken, have been utterly broken since they were developed as a concept. And it's been this huge problem, frankly, for the internet as a whole and for all of us, because we have, hundreds. I personally probably have thousands of accounts, and yes, we have password managers like 1Password and LastPass and Dashlane and whatnot. And Apple's done a better job of getting iCloud Keychain to be useful for remembering passwords and for everyday users as well. But the fact is that passwords are a terrible, terrible system that is thoroughly messed up. So passkeys is something that's an industry-wide standard. So it's built by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and a group called FIDO, which is another industry alliance that includes Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Facebook, and a ton of other companies. Basically, this is what you need to make one of these kinds of standards happen. You need broad industry support. So what passkeys does is, instead of forcing you to come up with and record and remember and enter a password, which can then be which is then stored, say, at a remote website, which can be then breached and stolen, so that a bad guy can log in as you. Passkeys eliminates all that. So what it does instead is that when you set up an account or upgrade an existing account to passkey support, the system creates two keys. This is a concept called public key cryptography. So you get a public one and a private key. The public key goes to the website, and that just says public key is this is Adan Engst public key. And so if I come to the site and I want to log in, the site says, "Hey, I got your public key. Can you confirm that you own the private key that matches it?" And then when your iPhone confirms that, basically it'll pop up a Face ID or a Touch ID authentication prompt, just sort of like Apple Pay does now. It will say, "Oh, great, no problem. I see that these match," and you'll log in. But because it's just like kind of logging into or setting up Face ID or Touch ID with the phone the first time, it's just recording stuff in the background. You don't ever see what's there. You don't know what your passkeys are. So you couldn't be fooled into giving them away because you don't know what they are. They're deep within your device and they live only in your device. Actually, they sync across your devices just like all of your other stuff does. So you can get to the same ones from different devices. But so what this is going to mean is that when you go to a website, basically you go try to start to log in, it'll probably just ping your phone. You'll hit Touch ID or Face ID, and you'll log in. That's it. The website can't be breached. Your passkey cannot be phished from you. It can't be spoofed by a site that looks like the site you're trying to log into because it won't match up properly. It's just a really, really well done system. Now, Mitch's comment about what's going to happen if you're incapacitated and someone needs to get to it. The simple answer, as I said, is that all your passkeys live on your devices. So as long as someone has access to your devices legitimately, because you've given it to them, they'll be able to use your passkeys to log in from there. So if you can share a passcode, obviously with a Touch ID, you can share up to 5 fingers. With Face ID, you can share 2 faces. It's always worth making sure you got a backup for the people in your life who will have to help out if you have troubles. So that's there's a bunch of ways of doing that. Legacy contact is the other feature I mentioned, and I'm honestly not. I haven't got. I mean, it's like it's a little hard to have experience with this without have someone die. But the whole idea of it is you can specify someone to be your legacy contact. And with the appropriate proof of someone passing away to Apple, Apple will then give you full access to that person's iCloud account and data. So that's an excellent thing to sign up for. I strongly recommend it. And you can search on the web, you'll see information for Apple on how to do that. So realistically, there's only one downside to passkeys that we've identified so far. I don't think people here are going to run into it much, but the downside is that it's not clear that you can easily transfer your passkeys from, say, an iPhone to a Windows machine or an iPhone to an Android phone. So at the moment, it's looking like you're going to be kind of stuck within an ecosystem. So if you're all Apple, you're totally fine. And it's no problem to even go to another person's machine. Say your friend has a PC and you want to log into your Amazon account or whatever on their PC. If you've got your iPhone to prove who you are, the passkeys system has a way of doing that on a one-time basis. So you could even share passkeys via AirDrop, but again, Apple only. So if you want to share a passkey to your Netflix account with your kid, you can do that. You just AirDrop it to them, and they'll be able to get in. But switching between ecosystems, going between Windows and Android and Mac, that might be tricky. We don't know what the answer to that is going to be yet. It's also worth remembering that in the foreseeable future, not everyone's going to be able to have devices that support passkeys. I mean, you need some kind of authentication system built into the device. So a bog standard old PC won't do it. You need some kind of secure authentication. So passwords aren't going away, and all sites are going to continue to support them. So what again, a little bit remains to be seen is once you've upgraded to a passkey account on some particular site, if you'll still be able to use your old passwords there. Answer is we don't quite know. It may be up to the different sites, but it's possible. And the downside of that is that passwords, as I said, huge security vulnerability. Passwords are just terrible. And so if we have to keep passwords around during the transition to passkeys, we won't get the full benefit of the security of passkeys until those passwords can start being dispensed with. So we'll see. But I have high hopes for passkeys in terms of really helping out with some of this kind of stuff. And, we actually have a comment, Timothy's commenting in the chat, that he uses a YubiKey. And that's a hardware-based key that is built on the same underlying technology as passkeys. And those things are brilliant. You just have to have another object. And the beauty of passkeys is that it takes all the smarts and capabilities that are in that object and that hardware key. And so you don't have to, connect it via USB or connect it via Bluetooth or whatever. You can instead just use your iPhone or your iPad to authenticate. So,
Adam, we have some other
yes.
questions for you.
Yes.
Lawrence Decker, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Lawrence, are you there?
Sorry, I was trying to use the space key.
No problem.
Yeah, I just see a new concept that Apple comes out with, and is passkeys kind of a automated or a sophistication of TFA?
Yeah, that's a good question. So usually the term that most people use is 2FA, for two-factor authentication. And you've seen this, right? Where you sign up for an account and along with your username and your password, when you log in, the site says, hey, give me your security code. And the security code you get in usually one of three ways. They might text it to you in a text message, you might get it in email, or you might have an authenticator app like Google Authenticator or Authy or something like that. And it's usually a 6-digit, sometimes 5, sometimes 7, but usually 6-digit code that you type in. And the idea is that, again, because passwords are utterly broken, let's not have no illusions that passwords are not broken. They are thoroughly broken. Because passwords can be stolen and compromised like that, the second factor, this two-factor authentication, says, oh, well, we know that this person has an iPhone with this authentication app on it that will securely generate a code, and that code changes every 30 seconds. So it's not something that can be hacked. We'll increase the security of our broken password systems by adding two-factor authentication. And it does, and that's good. It's great, except for the fact that it's extra work. You have to do a whole nother step to get that second factor code and entered into the system. So passkeys actually builds the concept of two-factor authentication internally into the system. Because remember how I said that the passkeys exist only on your devices? So the only way to unlock a passkey to be able to, to acknowledge to a channel, a website says, "Hey, Adan Engst, can you log in?" The only way my iPhone can provide my private key as a proof that I am who I say that I can log in is if I unlock it. And so by doing that unlocking, you're providing proof of a second factor. And so two-factor authentication is in essence built right in. And it's even in some ways, a little better even, because most of the time that second factor is going to be biometric. Most of the time it's going to be Touch ID, it's going to be Face ID. So it's also proving you are who you are, right? Because only you can get your Touch ID or Face ID to work, or one of your agreed upon users. It's not quite perfect that way, because as I said, you can always fall back on your device's passcode. If your device's passcode is just 1111111, yeah, it's not as secure as it should be. But if you have a reasonable device passcode, that's a pretty good sense of security. So the answer is yes. Passkeys do take over from two-factor authentication in a useful way, and you will not have to do two-factor as well as passkeys.
All right, thank you. Eckert, you have a question.
Yes, I am really interested what your opinion is on what will happen to companies like Password One. It has become a multi-billion-dollar company. It has grown significantly financially and also as far as their users are concerned. And they've also become, in my opinion, quite greedy in asking subscription amounts of money. So what, in your opinion, will happen to a company like Password One? How will they survive if the passkey really becomes the more prominent tool?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer. But so AgileBits, the company behind 1Password, has indeed been moving more towards the enterprise side, and subscriptions and things like that. And I think part of the reason for that is that Apple has been building, frankly, password management features into macOS and iOS and iPadOS. So if you go to the system preferences passwords or settings passwords in iOS, you can see a lot of kind of the basics of 1Password are there. And so what I think AgileBits and similar companies are seeing is that they need to add more enterprise level features and move to a slightly different audience to be able to survive long term. Now, as to what passkeys is going to do to that, it's a really good question, because you're still going to need to store your passkeys somewhere, and it does not at the moment look like that's going to be something which is generalized. Like it's going to be deep within iOS or iPadOS or macOS where those things are stored, and because it's within the hardware of the device. And so it is not clear to me that Apple and Microsoft and Google will open up that to third parties. I almost would be a little surprised if they did, just because it feels like that would be a security vulnerability in and of itself. So I don't know. It is worth noting that passkeys is going to take some time. I mean, we've got people using, 10-year-old Macs all the time. They're not going to be able to participate if that's their only device. And so it's probably going to be, my hope is that those people who have the devices that will support passkeys and the operating systems will support passkeys will start to switch quickly, and that will push adoption on the part of all the websites that are creating accounts. And we will move it more quickly, but that will become a reason to, at some point, upgrade from that 10-year-old computer or that 8-year-old phone that seems, it's on the whole, it's working well, but, if you could just get better security through passkeys, maybe that would be a reason to upgrade, and that will move it along a little bit more quickly, because, at some point, if you're stuck with the old stuff, it hurts security for everyone. So I wish I knew more, but that's my speculation for now.
So Adam, do you think that 1Password will still be useful or working while people have passkey Okay.
Yeah, because if nothing else, not, I mean, only like initially, right, the big sites will do passkey support, but little sites won't. I mean, I actually, to be honest, I looked into it for Tidbits, right? Because we have accounts for our Tidbits members and people who subscribe to Tidbits. And I looked into what it would take to do the underlying technology. It's called WebAuthn, is what it's, web authentication. And for our WordPress-based site, there's a few plugins that sort of offer it, but it's not prime time yet. So like it will take us probably, 6 months or a year after, these plugins start to become usable before we can say, finally we can jump to it. So, and even after we do with that, we're going to have to keep passwords available for everyone else. So it'll be a process. It's not going to be a fait accompli.
All right, so they both still will probably be on your machines. You will probably still use both until this gets sort of finalized.
Absolutely.
Okay, Don Peacock, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Are we still going to be able to type in our passwords? Because I don't care for a non-financial site. Because when you talk about the legacy thing for Apple, now they would need permission from Apple, but stuff that I wouldn't care, like the newspaper, they could just log in and cancel my subscription and things like that without having to first contact Apple, or a lot of my accounts, I wouldn't care.
So it's worth keeping in mind, you make an interesting point. It's worth keeping in mind that there's no communication with Apple that has to be done for a website to support passkeys. This is an industry standard, and sites are already doing it, as Timothy was saying, with a YubiKey. If you have this hardware thing, that's essentially passkeys. And so the technology is industry standard, and all the sites will be adopting it regardless. For sites, sites that don't feel like they have much in the way of sensitive data, they'll probably be a little slower. You're correct. I mean, you can bet your bank's gonna switch to this as soon as they possibly can, because banks care really deeply about people having secure access. But the other thing to remember is passkeys is just easier. Like, it's having to type in a password or trigger one password or do anything along those lines way harder than just authenticating with your touch ID or Face ID on your iPhone or your Mac. So it's just going to be, it is just better in every way. And so even if as soon as your newspaper site supports it, I think you'd want to switch, because it would take logging in from 15 or 20 seconds down to 1 second. I mean, it seems small, but you log in all the time, and why waste those 15 or 20 seconds typing in a password when you don't have to?
Well, a lot of those, I have my browser save the password.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that passwords are going to go away tomorrow. But I'm just saying that once passkeys are available for any site, it's better in every way. There's just no question. This isn't something you want to resist. It's not going to be something you can take advantage of everywhere, but when you can, I recommend it, because it's only by doing that we get to move forward. Whereas if it doesn't actually get any adoption, then we're going to be stuck with the thoroughly broken password system. I mean, how many times a month do we hear about some major company being their data breached and 40 million passwords being stolen? That's the kind of thing we deal with. And my website is constantly under attack by people, bots trying accounts with different passwords. So, that's something that'll all go away, and we need that to go away.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Don. All right, Adam, I'm going to let you move forward. We have questions, but we're going to save those questions.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we got some more. We got plenty more features here. This is a big one, Stage Manager. So iPads have basically been kind of overgrown iPhones for a long time. And Apple's added some multitasking features, and you could split the screen and have some slide over stuff and whatnot. But when push came to shove, the iPad was just not as functional as a Mac where you could have multiple windows. Sometimes you need to see stuff that works. You need to work between apps very fluidly. And the whole slide over splits view concept wasn't very discoverable. Apple keeps trying to improve it, but with iPadOS 16, they've introduced something new called Stage Manager. And you can see it here on screen. It's an interesting question. It's an interesting approach where basically you get this kind of apps in the windows in the center here, which you can switch between by tapping on. And then off to the left are other apps that are still running. You can switch to those really quickly. It's probably going to help on the iPad. I haven't got a chance to use it yet because you'll notice my headline here, Stage Manager on M1 iPads. It only works on iPads that have the M1 chip, which is the latest iPad Pro models, the 12.9 and the 11-inch, and the latest iPad Air. My old iPad Pro 10.5 just isn't supported, so I can't check it. We'll see. I think it's good that Apple's trying here, but I still remain a little dubious. The big thing you can't see from this kind of a presentation is that what it also gets you, and this is really this is almost more interesting, is when you've got using Stage Manager, you can use 4 apps on your iPad and another 4 apps on an external display. Because remember, it's M1 iPads all have USB-C, so you can plug in a big external monitor and then use more apps on that. So this will really make the iPad a better multitasking machine. And I sort of almost hate the term multitasking because it's not like you're doing multiple things simultaneously. It's more that you're referencing one app while working in another. Or you're moving information from one app to another very fluidly. So that I think is going to become useful. I don't mention it here on the slide, but Stage Manager is also coming to the Mac. And even Apple admitted no one's going to use it on the Mac. I mean, they didn't quite say it that bad. Craig Federighi kind of said, yeah, we suspect that 80% of Mac users will continue working the way they do now. I think that's generous. I think it's probably going to be more like 95% of Mac users. Only a very few people are going to take this up on the Mac, I think, and that's probably those people who really like it on the iPad. So it will appear on your Macs once you're running macOS 13 Ventura. Feel free to check it out. You might like it, but my suspicion is that like Launchpad, another bring a holdover from iOS that I've never really seen anyone use in the real world. Works, there's nothing wrong with it, but no one uses it on the Mac because it's not the way Mac users think, and that way, even if you're an iPhone user. So Stage Manager is something which you can check out when that comes out and see if you like it, but only if you have an M1 iPad. Everyone else will have to go on. Okay, any quick questions on Stage Manager before I move on?
None.
None. All right. All right, this is quick. Some of the features that Apple announced at WWDC fell into what we call the "it's about time" department. And so how many years has it been since, let's see, the iPad came out in 2010 and it's 2022 now. So 12 years it took Apple to come out with the weather app. I mean, not that we haven't had other weather apps, of course, but really, isn't it kind of embarrassing that it took them 12 years to come out with the weather app that they had on the iPhone all these years, pretty much? And so finally, you'll be able to get the weather on your iPad and your Mac because it's coming to Ventura as well. So again, this isn't revolutionary. It's just kind of filling in the gaps of what was Apple thinking. So another nice little about time feature for those who use maps for driving, or you could do it for trip planning on your Mac. I personally use it for screenshots on my Mac, but mostly in driving on the iPhone. You can finally have a trip that has multiple stops. And this is actually surprisingly useful. I mean, if you haven't really thought, I mean, just pop in a direction and go, that's fine. But what if you really do need to go to A, B, and C before you get to your destination D? And so now you'll be able to add up to 15 stops in Maps, and Maps will figure out the best route for you. This is something I do in Google Maps, not often, but boy, when you want it, you want it. And so it's nice that you don't have to end navigation and start it up again once you'll be running iOS 16. Let's see. Okay, messages. Oh, talk about, it's about time. In messages, Apple is introducing 3 much requested features. This is the community has been up in arms over some of these, most particularly actually the 3rd one, mark unread. You know how you get the little red dot on the messages icon on your iPhone when there's a new message waiting? Well, that tells you there's something there. And similarly, when you go in, you see a blue dot next to the conversation telling you there's new messages in that conversation. And so that helps you know what to look at. Well, you read the message and you're busy, so you can't act on it. Now you can mark it as unread. So you'll be able to come back later and say, oh, right, I was going to do something, and actually finish it off. So mark unread is going to be really helpful for, someone texts you while you can't respond, and you're like, yes, I need to deal with that. Mark it as unread, come back to it in an hour. Another nice one, you can edit a message. Autocorrect is not your friend. Well, it's sort of your friend, but it's not one of those nice friends. It's one of those friends that plays cruel jokes on you occasionally. If you type something and autocorrect makes it thoroughly embarrassing, you can just go and edit the message and change it so that it's not thoroughly embarrassing and actually uses the word you meant to type. That'll be helpful. And similarly, undo send is, and this is what's shown here on the, okay, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have sent this, was a little too lovey-dovey. You can pull that back and, think a little harder. So undo send just re-pulls that message back out of the stream. Obviously, if someone's already seen it, too bad, too late. But hey, it's better than having to be totally stuck with everything you send. So those are really going to be really welcome. Similarly, Apple Mail. Pretty much everyone uses Apple Mail. I won't say that. Many people use Apple Mail. It's built in. It's a pretty good mail client. It's not my favorite. I use something else called MimeStream. But one of the things that Apple is finally paying attention to is mail. And so you'll see they've got the undo send. Again, it's a feature that's really nice because I don't know about you, but I send something all the time and go, oh, right, I meant to. I meant to CC someone, I meant to mention such and such, whatever. And so you can hit Command Z and pull it back and then edit, make your changes and resend. So with Gmail, which is what I use kind of behind the scenes with MimeStream, I can do that for 30 seconds. With Mail, I believe it's going to be only 10 seconds. So it's pretty fast, but still it's that, it gives you just that one quick, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to send without doing X. So pull it back. Scheduling, that's what you can see in the screenshot here now. You can schedule messages to be sent at a particular time. This is really useful for sort of surprising reasons. For instance, my wife works at Cornell University, and in her department, they actually they say, we do not want people working in the middle of the night because it creates a bad culture, right? If someone else is sending mail at, midnight, or, even worse, 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning, then other people start to feel like, oh, geez, I need to be available at those times to read and respond and all that. And it creates a bad working environment. And so they actually have, they use a different program for mail, use Outlook, but they have a rule that basically, if you're going to be working at weird times, that's up to you, but you schedule your mail so that it comes in during working hours so that other people don't feel bad about that. And so that's a really nice little thing. It's also just occasionally helpful, like, yeah, I need to send someone mail, tomorrow, but if I send it to them, first thing today, that'll be sitting in their mailbox too long and maybe they won't see it at the right time. So you can just queue it up for later. Follow-up is another new feature, which basically says, hey, you sent mail to so-and-so and they didn't reply. Is that a problem? You know, are you concerned about that fact? And so it'll remind you, it'll say, hey, so-and-so has not yet checked back with you. Do you want to follow up? Again, feature of Gmail can be kind of handy because, you know, once you've sent a message, if you don't hear back, it's easy to forget, easy to lose track of it. And then finally, remind me is sort of the same thing as follow-up, but you get to set it manually. So you're like, I'm sending a message to George, and you know, when George replies, you know, or actually, you know, regardless of George replies, you know, in 2 days I need to do X because I said I would. And so that's, you can pop up a reminder to yourself that you are attaching to a message. So that's going to be kind of useful. And so, yeah, so nice to see messages and mail getting some attention, both of them very heavily used. And Apple really hasn't been paying too much attention to like the functionality. They're like, yeah, they do stickers, they'll make it swizzy, all that, but not a lot of real focus on how we use it. Now, here's one that I'm really excited to see. So back in the day, remember iPhoto? I wrote books about iPhoto, so I was very into iPhoto and all of those apps for a long time. And one of the things that was very frustrating to me was Apple is a company that thinks about the individual as their kind of core audience. And that's all fine and nice, but some things really are not individual. So like photos are often a family scenario. You know, I mean, I don't know about you, but growing up, we had the family photo albums. That's how it worked. And so, yeah, it's great that we all have a camera in our pocket with our iPhones now, a camera in our purse. We've all got our own personal photos, but we still need to have those shared family photos. And we have a family album. If you set up family sharing, it'll create a family album and you can put stuff in it. It'll all be shared with everybody. But it isn't quite the same thing. And so what Apple's coming out with in iOS 16 and macOS 13 and iPadOS 16 is iCloud Shared Photo Library. And it's just a completely new photo library. And there's ways of putting photos into it. So you can say, all my photos from certain dates, all my photos with certain people, that kind of thing. And then you can have photos automatically maintain it by putting, like if you're in the proximity of one of your family members and you take a photo, it can go in. Or if you take a photo of a particular person, it can automatically go into the shared library. So this is going to be a much better thing for sort of maintaining that family store of photos, you know, where you really do want to have everyone doing it. I mean, there's times when I'd like to look back at, you know, my childhood photos that my parents have in albums. And that would be something I'd be able to do if they uploaded those to iCloud Shared Photo Library. All right, any questions before I move on?
Not on this.
Okay. Dictation. Oh, here's one that I'm looking forward to in a big way. So dictation, I mean, you all know there's that little microphone button on the iPhone and the iPad when you're and you can switch in the keyboard. So you switch from talking to typing and typing to talking. Well, the problem with that is that dictation makes mistakes. It makes a lot of mistakes. It's still better than typing in a lot of cases, but some of the mistakes are really problematic. You know, I'll admit, I'm a writer. When I text and all that sort of stuff, I have to do it in full sentences with proper punctuation. That's who I am. And I get that people abbreviate and misspell and don't punctuate and don't care. But if you ever want to make changes, it's going to be a whole lot easier in iOS 16 and iPadOS 16 because the keyboard remains active while you're talking. So you can have it typing with your voice and go in and select and edit while you're still talking without switching back and forth. This isn't new. Apple's had a voice dictation feature that's sort of more an accessibility feature. It's for people who need to control their phones via voice. And it's looking like this is pretty much voice dictation cleaned up and sort of made more available. So one of the things that's really nice about this, because I actually do use voice dictation quite a lot, is you see it typing and as you speak, and then it gets a word wrong, and so you double tap on the word, or you tap on the word to select it, and say the word again, and it will replace instantly. So this is truly, truly brilliant. I discover, for instance, way I say well and while, I don't enunciate well enough. And so it often makes that mistake. And so I can easily double tap word, say while, and I'll get it correct the next time. So this is going to be a real boon. Obviously, you don't have to use it if you don't want to, but I think you're really going to like it. The other thing that it does now, finally, is it does punctuation automatically, detects pauses and it puts in periods and end of sentences and things like that. So once this comes out, I strongly encourage you to be using it, and that. And I do notice someone's got a comment about will it improve with accuracy? My experience is no. The voice dictation is basically just, it knows it's a general model. It doesn't seem to tune it to you or adjust over time. So good and bad. I mean, I guess it's one thing that I would sure like is if you could lock the dictation to your voice, because what's tremendously annoying is I turn on voice dictation, which was just always listening, and if I so much as tap in a text field and my wife's speaking, it picks her up and it's putting her text into my text field, and I'm like, wait, stop, and deleting, and so it would be nice if it was smart enough to know that only the owner of the iPhone should be listened to, but I don't believe that's going to be the case. I haven't tested that because I haven't installed on my iPhone yet for the betas. Okay, continuity camera. This is something, it's a total hack. Okay, let's be real. This is kind of cool, but it's a total hack. So we all have webcams. I'm like, I'm sitting there looking at your webcams, and no offense, but your Mac webcams, they aren't very good. Apple has done a lousy job of putting high quality webcams on its Macs. And only in the last year or so has it done anything better than 720p, which is 720 pixels across. So Apple's finally gone to 1080p, 1080 pixels across cameras, and in some of the most recent Macs. And they've used the digital signal processing stuff to improve the quality and all that. But it's still nowhere near, not even close to as good as an iPhone camera. iPhone cameras are vastly, vastly better. And so what Apple has done, and there's an app called Camo, C-A-M-O, which does this right now. But Apple is building in this capability of just attaching your iPhone to the back of your Mac to use the super high quality cameras that you have on your iPhone for video conferencing with the Mac. And this is going to be great because you really do get much, much better cameras. You also get access to a feature called Center Stage, which lets you walk around your room. I don't know if you can see me or not at all, but lets you walk around your room, and it kind of zooms and pans to follow you around your user, around the room. So Center Stages you'll get with the iPhone. You also get this kind of, I think, cool feature called Desk View, where it can actually look down right in front of you at your desk. And so you can show off something on your desk. I mean, for me, it would be me typing, which is kind of silly, but nonetheless, I could see uses for it. Here's my origami. Let me show you this. So Desk View is going to be kind of neat. And it'll have also a neat studio lighting view where it can, again, use computational photography to make it basically put light on your face and darken out the background behind you so you are more the focus of attention. So again, cool features you can do because you've got the mega capable iPhone cameras instead of the really pretty lame Mac cameras. And you notice that little white device that's holding it on there. Apple said that Belkin and probably others, I'm sure, within minutes of the release of this, will be releasing little clips that will go on the back of all sorts of Mac laptops and desktop monitors and things like that, so you can easily attach your phone in. And it's wireless or wired, but wireless should work fine. So you just kind of come home, poop, come over, wrap your iPhone in its little holder, and then start your video conferencing. So should be way, way better video conferencing quality than any kind of desktop webcam.
Adam, will there be any controls that you can get to while you're using that camera on the back of the iPhone, like a
Control.
Zoom or?
It's a good question. I don't know. Basically, my understanding is that it will just sort of act as the camera for the video conferencing app they're using. It will work with multiple video conferencing apps. So it won't be just FaceTime, Zoom, Google Meet, whatever. But my suspicion, knowing Apple, is that no, there won't be settings. That Apple believes they will set it the best on their own, and they don't need your help. Thank you very much. If you do want that kind of capability, actually, this Camo app that's available does let you do that kind of thing. It does let you give you access to more settings and adjustments. So it's possible. In fact, we will see Camo, and I mean, this is the story of Apple. Some developer comes out with a great feature. Apple Sherlocks it, basically takes it and puts it in the operating system. And the developer often says, okay, fine, let me focus on my high-end features. So if you want more adjustability, more customizability, then more compatibility with other apps, that's when the other developer's app maintains its audience. So it's possible that was what we'll see.
Good, because that's a great camera to just use as a webcam.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
All right. Pretty much last thing here. This sort of falls into the almost a little uncomfortable talk about, because it's not a feature that oh wow, you really want to use this feature, and I hope you never have to use this feature. But the simple fact is that our iPhones particularly, but all of our devices, know a lot about us now. And that's really a problem for some people who are in situations where, they've got an abusive ex, or, they're being sued for something, or a disgruntled employee, who knows? And so, but we've done things in our phones like sharing our location, by sharing other information, sharing passwords, that kind of thing. And so Apple's aware that this is being a problem. And so with iOS 16 and whatnot, they've introduced something called Safety Check. And it's a little hard to say exactly what this is going to do. We obviously haven't seen it yet, other than the keynote. But it is going to let you review what you're sharing with people and disable things that you don't want to be sharing, or remove people with whom you no longer wish to be sharing. Yeah, he turned out to be untrustworthy. So that's something which, I said, I'm sad that this feature is necessary, but I guess I'm happy that the Apple is taking more steps to help people who may not be as aware of how their phones work, to review their settings and turn off the ones they don't want. So, as I said, not a great thing, but certainly something that's necessary in the modern world, and particularly for those who, they just have a phone, they don't really know much about it, and they want to make sure that they're not doing something wrong. Okay, real quickly, because this is always the question: is can my X device run whatever? Mac OS 13. The short answer is pretty much anything that was released in 2017 or later. So that it's actually a pretty big swath of Macs that are dropped. Models from 2013 to 2016 supported Monterey, but will not support Ventura. And so you'll want to look fairly carefully at the model list to make sure that if you have an older Mac, that it is supported. If you're not really quite sure when it came out. Remember, you can always go to the Apple menu and choose About This Mac to find out what model your Mac is. It'll say up in there. iOS 16 is pretty easy. If you have an iPhone 8/8 Plus or later, you're good to go with iOS 16. And what that basically means, the drop list here, the original iPhone SE is out, the iPhone 6S is out, and the iPhone 7 is out. So all of those worked in iOS 15, but will not work in iOS 16. iPad OS, oh man, it's all over the map. I can't begin to give you a shorthand rubric for what is supported in iOS 16, except to say it's easier to think about it what isn't. So if you're using iOS 15 now on an iPad mini or an iPad Air, a 4th generation mini or a 2nd generation iPad Air, those are out. Those 2 models are out. Everything else that can run iOS 15 is in. So iPads are doing pretty well. watchOS 9, the Apple Watch Series 4 and later are all supported. And what that means is the Apple Watch Series 3 is being kicked off the back of the train. Now that's really weird in some ways if you think about it, because Apple's still selling the Apple Watch Series 3. You could buy it right now. It's on their site. I think that's really kind of problematic. But the short answer is, if you or anyone you know is thinking about buying an Apple Watch Series 3, don't. Wait until September, because the Apple Watch Series 3 will not be able to get watchOS 9, and it will, I say just already, it's on the very, very low end of performance and everything like that. So that's the one weird one there. Now, we actually did tidbits. We did a big article about this, the real system requirements. Apple does all these huge feature list pages with all the features, and then at the bottom they have like 20 footnotes, and the footnotes say, well, if you actually want to use continuity camera, you need the iPhone 11 or something like that. And so there's a whole bunch of features that require the A12 Bionic chip, which is just a particular generation of iPhone and iPad chip. And Apple's sort of drawn a line in the sand saying, yeah, you got to be this tall to play. If there are, some of these features, like I said, Stage Manager requires an M1, things like that. So you will be able to run iOS 16 on anything that, is, fits into those lists, but some of the features may not be available if your iPhone is on the older end of things, that kind of situation. So, all right. And that is pretty much it for me, but I'm happy to take any and all additional questions.
Okay, Mary, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes,
Mary?
I'm just wondering about that safety check. Are savvy teens going to be able to avoid having their parents follow them around?
Good question. I don't know. The simple answer, I'm afraid, is that savvy teens will always be able to get around this sort of stuff. It's just hopeless. I mean, you never underestimate the power of a child who really wants to get something to happen. So I don't think it will change too much in that regard, because at least I would hope not, because the teens would be potentially under a parental control scenario. So this is really more meant at like an abusive spouse. Or a dangerous relationship where something went sour and you were sharing with someone and now you don't want to. So hopefully the teens would be a different situation.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I'm sorry, Frank Salvatini, can you unmute yourself and ask a question?
Let's see, which one?
About the photos.
About the photos, yeah. Will the photos, family sharing, work with people who do everything on a PC? Don't have an iCloud.
I don't think so. This is truly an iCloud shared photo library. So this is not an album. So you can, that you can make a shared album in iCloud, and then you can share that with a link, and that's on the web, and you can give that to a PC user just fine.
Sure.
But this is a full iCloud shared photo library. So no, I can't say that for certain, but I'd be very, very surprised.
Okay.
And Frank, while you're here, go ahead and ask your question about the face.
About which?
Face. All right, someone's talking in the background. Frank, you had a question about changing the face of the software.
Oh, yes. Because I watch a lot of thrillers on TV.
Always dangerous.
There's people who are able to, there's software that can take your face and change it into another person's face. Okay, that they can clone you. If that does the facial ID, if you have a picture some way on a phone or something and show them that, will that unlock it?
No. So yes, I know exactly the thrillers you're talking about. And for the most part, no, that doesn't work.
Oh, good.
So Face ID is actually a really complicated system that uses it's called the True Depth camera, and it's on the front of an iPhone or iPad. And that camera is more than just a visual camera. It's actually using infrared as well. And so giving it a static picture won't work. It is not inconceivable that you could build a really, really realistic, like thin silicone mask that would actually fool Face ID, because keep in mind it's also it's a 3D image. It's not a
Right.
it's not a flat picture, and so it's not inconceivable that could happen. But unless you are in fact James Bond, it's not really worth doing.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. Thank you, Frank, for your question. And with that, we are out of time. I want to thank you, Adam, for such a wonderful presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to George.